everybody, and welcome to Parks Bros. It's Drew here, and we're finally back in our Planet Coaster 1 park, Rolling Springs. That's right, it's been since the release of Planet Coaster 2 since we've been messing around and building out this realistic amusement park in the middle of Colorado. It has been so long at this point, it feels like, since I dropped in, and honestly, I'm kind of glad I did. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but let's go ahead and check out all the new things in the park. There's already been so much change at this park as a whole. Plenty of coasters designed by you guys when I was streaming on Twitch. Now, there's a B&M Giga coaster that we've still got to finish up. More elements to that ride will be voted on soon. And there's just so much life to every inch of this park that I've built out. Thus far, it's just super, super exciting to me. Getting back into this game has been quite the trip, especially after playing a lot of Planet Coaster 2. I've got almost 100 hours in it, I think, overall. And to be honest, even though the newer updates have come out, I still feel like I want to give that game itself probably another 6 months or so before I end up picking it up again. Honestly, that just kind of makes me sad that this much anticipated sequel has kind of put me off in a way where I'm just like, yeah, no, I'll just keep waiting to play it until more and more updates come out. Now, I will admit, I have not played it since the first major update came out. I have not checked it out since the newest update just in this past week, which I should do. But honestly, that update only made me think about wanting to play the original again. So here I am. I've put in another couple hours of work, and I felt inspired again for the first time since October or November, which was really, really nice to have. Now, there wasn't too much that I did overall, but it's closer toward the backside of the park into one of the areas that still is going to be fleshed out more and more as we go along in the next couple episodes. To get there, you have to keep going past Planet Snoopy as well as Lulu City, and then you'll reach it. Who would have thought that one of the cornerstones of the Old West would meet with such a crazy place? As we take our stroll into the alpine forest, something big has decided to appear. Something blue and gold and very, very old. The Gates of Ishtar from the old city of Babylon as our new land, Cradles of Civilization, is just about to begin. It's really been exciting going into this different style of theming. It's a little bit more highly themed than a lot of the parts of the park thus far, but it would have been a later addition before the park would have been sold off to Cedar Fair in the mid-2000s, and it's really showing a lot of interesting tendencies that we would have seen during the 90s period at a lot of parks. There were really highly themed sections of areas, and it would be right next to something that was absolutely bare bones. And you can get a great idea of what that would look like with this grand entryway for the Cradles of Civilization, with the log flume going above the Gates of Ishtar, and then immediately to the left-hand side, just bare log flume support structures and the actual flume itself just being super plain. Now, getting a closer look, I have not completed this entryway quite yet. This was actually a blueprint piece that I've decided to use and move about a little bit. So if you look up Ishtar on the Steam Workshop, you will be able to see a creation that is pretty much identical to this, except I've expanded it width-wise, so it goes a little farther in the tunnel. And actually, something cool that I have done is modify it so that the train even goes through the side of it. So you could still have the width that was needed in these pillars that held up the gate. And I added some extra foliage to make more of a difference there with the height variation, as well as really signifying the difference in area that you will be encountering through this tunnel. It really kind of transports you to a different part of the world, especially having these conifers and firs right outside, and then boom, palm trees, date palms, just all sorts of different foliage from the get-go as we enter the tunnel. Kind of inspired a little bit by Super Nintendo World with this look, and then immediately to the left-hand side you're greeted with just these stalks of bamboo, and you can see peeking out just above, to pique your interest, a wooden coaster. This is our wooden coaster made by GCI called Xanadu, which I kind of let the name of that ride, even though it was a Rush reference at the time, really inspire the theming and what the theming would be going forward. As you can see the train actually going by right now. Xanadu is a name that comes from at least what's thought to be the capital of China at the time under Kublai Khan. Kublai, if you did not know, was one of the many sons of Genghis Khan, and he was the main leader following Genghis Khan's death. And so realistically, that capital city got placed in a couple of myths down the line, and through many writings over hundreds and hundreds of years, this idea of this golden city called Xanadu came about, and Rush named a song after that. We had a couple Rush fans in the audience that were like, name this ride after a Rush song, and we ended up falling on Xanadu. So it led to the theming using a lot of the pieces from the World's Fair pack that are specifically for the Qing Dynasty, which I know that technically doesn't line up timeline-wise with the actual name Xanadu at all, but you'll see parks do this stuff all the time when it comes to historical accuracy. They'll use inaccurate architecture for the time and other things like that, that I will say, as a little bit of a history nerd, does grind my gears a tiny bit, but this is just something we would have seen, especially in the middle of the 2000s at amusement parks. And also, unfortunately, this is just the only type of architecture we have that relates directly to China within the game, so this is kind of what we ended up messing around with. So I think it looks pretty nice. There is a freshly staffed chow mein place, which is great now. It's funny seeing all the vendors scrambling to make sure they look good for the boss, I guess. I will say the amount of vendors I need to keep rehiring is astronomical in this game, which is unfortunate, but at least the management exists, unlike in Planet Coaster 2, which is just one of my main complaints thus far with everything going on right now with that game. Something sightline-wise I did want to try and figure out a bit, though, was how to block the gates of Ishtar, as well as the log flume that goes through them. Unfortunately, could not really figure out a way to do that properly without completely butchering some of the other sightlines that I had in place already. And honestly, this is not something that a lot of parks would really care that much about, outside of maybe parks like Disneyland back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, or maybe Universal with Islands of Adventure. But even then, their sightlines aren't exactly perfect from every angle. So I just kind of took that thought process. It's not going to be perfect from every angle. And, you know, sometimes things are going to peek through. So I just kind of let it go. You can see the lift hill for the log flume back there as well, just above the building. This kind of reminds me a little bit of Magic Mountain with the Laughing Dragon, which is at the top of the hill. Has a fairly similar Eastern Asian art style and architecture style to it. It's very, very plain, I will say, overall, but that's directly next to, or was directly next to, one of the log flumes at the park, and I'm sure this would have been a very similar feel and look at the park when both of those were still in operation. But let's go ahead and turn around. You could see some of the other sight lines from our small Chinese themed area. Got this giant SNS screaming swing on the left, and then this is part of the Babylon section still. Our Skyrocket 2, that's actually named Ishtar because the support structure does kind of look like the gates a little bit. And even though it's not going to be directly next to the gate itself, that would have been a later addition into the Babylon part of the Cradles of Civilization area that we're working on over here. And honestly, theming-wise, it's not going to have much outside of maybe a miniature version of the gates at the entryway. That's about it. At least that's how it usually works for a lot of those Skyrocket 2 models. The theming is very, very minimal overall. Now, before we get a look into the station, we have to go to the entry plaza, which actually goes underneath the final brake run before the transfer track building on the left-hand side here, as there's this giant sign that states Xanadu is this way. And make sure to not hit your head here. Unfortunately, with just some of the height, there is the possibility of that for some of the peeps in the park. But you get this cool view of the main lift hill, the entry gate that's right here to the left. I actually still have to add the safety information signs here. That's something I forgot to do. But then the ride goes around this plaza. I think this would be an absolutely amazing spot to grab some photos or videos, especially if you're a coaster nerd. Like, it would be insane to be able to view all of that. There's some crossover moments in the coaster itself, but it's all kind of peeking out of this bamboo forest that you've found yourself in, which I think is just really, really cool overall. Like, it kind of just pops in and out of your view. And at night, I've actually added some cool floodlights underneath the lift hill that really illuminate this coaster in a cool way, which we'll get a look at it in just a little bit of time as the ride is about to finally come down that drop. I've only got 500 guests in the park right now just because the game would explode with me recording at the same time with more than that at this point. But yeah, oh wow, you didn't even see it from this angle. That's kind of funny. But it pops out. There's a little double up moment. It turns to the right, and then it goes out in kind of a similar fashion to Mystic Timbers, if you don't remember what this layout looks like. And we will have a POV for all the rides once we finish up the entire park, which is going to be crazy. Hopefully in the next couple of months or so will be happening. As there it is, the coaster comes around and goes right into the brake run like that. It's really, really cool. It was kind of an accidental sightline thing for me here. I was not meaning to put a plaza here, but it worked out that way. So anyway, let's go ahead and enter through the queue. Super simplistic in here. Just a bunch of switchbacks, a lot of bamboo, and then some basic lighting. And at the end of it, I decided to add in a small dragon statue to add some of the focus toward the back here and really make it kind of interesting there. Of course, there's an autosave as I'm walking down the middle here. But yeah, I wanted to make sure it was a similar color to the trains as well, so it makes it feel like you're riding on the dragon itself, which I think that's kind of what we're going for with the loose theming here, at least in terms of storyline. But yeah, I think it looks really, really nice back here. It kind of just adds something back here instead of it just being closed off in bamboo all the way around, which I would have thought would be a little too boring for especially this miniature area with all of the theming and the architecture on the buildings. So it's just nice to have just set pieces like that going throughout the area as we'll make our way around. I will apologize, the FPS does die quite a bit with this park now, as we're gonna get a cool view right here. Train going around the track from the top of the station, which this station is not quite done. I still have a couple other things I gotta do, especially in terms of ride operator booth. As you can see, there's currently just a pillar going through the middle of it. But yeah, it's super simplistic station overall. Nothing crazy, very open air, and has just a little bit of theming on the inside outside of the work lights itself. So from the exit, you can see down into the food plaza that we've built up, the entry gates with the log flume, and then of course looking back, you can see more things from the coaster itself, as well as one of our employees kind of glitching through one of those pillars. As we head down, we'll just be back at the entry to the land, which I think works out very, very well if you ask me. Like, if you're interested in riding the coaster and you didn't care for it, or you want to go ride something else, you hop right out, and then boom, you're right back across the tracks. It's super simple path, guest flow wise, I guess. It's super simplistic path, it's super simplistic guest flow wise. And if you really want to get food in the area or you're waiting for somebody, those people will trickle over toward the left most likely. There is going to be some crossover if they want to find a lot of seating, because that is all over by the coaster entrance, but hopefully that flows okay, as it kind of promotes a left to right movement, at least from this angle. Now we find ourselves outside the entrance of the Cradles of Civilization to enter through the backstage area real quick off to the left. We've been here before. This is where one of the haunted houses in the park during the Halloween haunt season is. This is Spider House. We talked about that more in a different episode, but this area is all officially backstage, which I am going to be working on the backstage area going forward a lot more, because it was actually kind of interesting to go back into the backstage and work on what the log flume has going on in this indoor section here. Now, I will say a lot of direct inspiration for this log flume on the interior was really inspired by the Fountain of Youth log flume in Germany at Tripsdrill, I believe. That has an indoor moment that I just felt like fit perfectly to be the Hanging Gardens in Babylon, and this is kind of a similar idea to that log flume, and I think it works pretty dang well. With all the foliage, especially, some of the vases shoot water back at you, which I thought was fun. But let's go ahead and make it nighttime so you can really see what the lighting looks like. Now, there's been some pretty simplistic lighting. It is not exactly a brilliant looking piece at all. You could tell the log flume was definitely kind of more of an afterthought, or maybe they ran low on budget after putting so much money into the main gate structure or something like that, right? But while you're on ride, you can't really see too much in terms of the kind of not so great looking aspects of the building unless you're specifically looking directly up. And with a lot of theme parks, it's exactly the same way. Just if you ever ride Radiator Springs Racers, when you're inside, if you look directly up, the whole facade is ruined, right? So it's kind of a similar vibe here, although a little more shoddy in its representation of that. So I think it looks nice. The lighting is kind of bare bones overall, but it sets a vibe, and then once you end up heading out of this room, you just go directly back up a lift hill here and then down to the final drop where you'll get your photo taken and have a really wonderful time, I think. Now let's go ahead and walk out towards the front entrance yet again as we make our way this way. Still need to do some lighting on the main gateway, but of course it's going to be a little bit more simplistic overall because I'm still thinking they ran out of budget about halfway through. But you can see some of the lighting on Xanadu itself, and the sign is absolutely illuminated in every single way it possibly can. It's just so bright. It's kind of ridiculous. But at the same time, that's just kind of how signs work in this game. And it's a little unfortunate, I'm not going to lie, but I'm not totally against it, as I just made sure to light up everything surrounding it as much as I could. But this is kind of what it looks like at night. I gotta say, I'm pretty proud with how it came out. Super subtle lighting in the main areas here. I didn't want it to scream like the coaster does over in the background here. I think that looks a lot more interesting with it just being so bright in comparison. It almost has like this feeling of like clouds illuminated by the moon or something like that, which I really dig that vibe. Yeah, I think it looks great. I'm really excited about it, and I can't wait to see more of, realistically, Rolling Springs being back again after disappearing for a third of the year, which is insane. It's kind of wild to see all this progress in just about a day's work too, which means my flow is there again. I'm inspired. I'm really excited, and I hope you are too. But with that all said, I want to say thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet, and if you're excited for more Rolling Springs and Rolling Rapids videos in the future. But until then, we'll see you on the next ride.